let's see now. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sure we're going to get some other people on, but we could start since it is 12:01. Thank you all for being here on time. I want to thank Imei for doing this and sharing her experience on the Vancouver Marathon, which is probably, as she says, one of the most beautiful marathons in the North America, but also should be on everybody's bucket list. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you. Just let me know when to change the slides.
I was about to ask that. Okay, let me get my view up here of myself so I can see what you all are seeing. Make certain there is an egg on my face. Good morning from Seattle, Washington. It is a chilly 36 degrees. We're about to plummet underneath freezing level pretty soon. I am in a desperate state to find any little bit of sunshine and warmth because over these years, I've decided in wintertime, I like going to warm places. And one of our options, which was Tucson, is actually colder than it is here right now. So that sort of fell out. So that's where I'm at in wanting to talk to you about the BMO Vancouver Marathon, because I realize that even though it's one of my absolute favorite road marathons that I have done so far, including the Ironman marathons that I've done within an Ironman, that I had some perspective just to talk about marathons in general and then talk about this one in specific and why I think it's one of the most beautiful marathons in North America, perhaps the world. So I wanted to start with maybe where some of us might be with that, whether you're here watching now and talking this over with me now, or you watch it later on. So you're viewing this later on after this recording has been well over and done. You're thinking, what, do I even want to do a road marathon at all? So let me just start with that. Go ahead and flip to the next slide, Hillary. Okay. So I'm going to let that sit there so you can just look at the stats while I just talk about marathons in general. And I'm going to be absolutely honest with you. I've gotten to a place in my life where road marathons are not my favorite things. They're up there because I love running. So just starting with that, I actually love running. And I think if I didn't love running, I may have never gotten into triathlon, because the way I worked it out between my coach and I is this. He's like, you kind of suck at the swim, and I'm not sure that will ever really change for you. And I agree with that. He goes, and you're okay at the bike, but you're not particularly fast. But when you get to the run, something clicks in your head where you go, this is what I've been waiting for. And everything else was just a warm up to that road marathon. And then I just go. And even though it's not fast, even though it's not particularly beautiful, I love that part. So I wanted to put it out there to give you a moment to say, if you already have figured out that you are interested in a marathon, doesn't even matter which one, is just to sit with your why. Why do you want to do that? What is it about running, and then specifically half marathoning or marathoning in your own story that you resonate with, and to rekindle that passion and that love as we start talking about the BMO Vancouver Marathon, and then marathons in general and how they compare. So I can give you a few seconds to kind of sit with that. That might become a part of conversation as we get into Q&A. All right. So when is it? What is it? The BMO Vancouver Marathon. BMO, by the way, is a bank. The BMO Vancouver Marathon takes place in, of course, Vancouver, British Columbia. It will be next year, actually, on Sunday, May 7th. So it's always the first weekend of May. And then there's the virtual race if you cannot do the live in-person one, and that's April 1st through May 31st. And for those who know that they will not be traveling or cannot go across an international border at this time for whatever reason, such as your passport needs renewal, you prefer to cross that border, having one of the Nexus passes for land crossings, whatever the reason. And where is it? Vancouver, British Columbia. And this is right in the city. This is not
Yes.
pushed out somewhere on the sides. It's right in the city. It's recognized by Forbes. I took this right off of their website.
I
By
could just
Forbes.
call them.
Sorry, I'm hearing somebody else. Forbes, CNN, and USA Today as one of the top destination marathons in the world. The award-winning marathon course is renowned for its unique scenic views showcasing snow-capped mountain ranges, like enough to make you cry. It's so beautiful. Cherry blossom trees. So they start blooming in the spring. They will be singing by that first weekend in May. You'll see them everywhere. And the real clincher is 70% of the race runs along water. And I'm not talking a little river. I'm talking their big sound there. So you're really seeing the beauty of this city in all of its glory. The air is clean. The sky may not be clear, but you will feel like you're in the most open space and yet not exposed, like open, like there's nothing there. You're right in the city. Okay, next slide. So here's a couple little pictures. If you've never been to Vancouver, there's some of that shoreline that you will see from one side on that left picture. And what you're looking on the right-hand side is part of their convention center. I'm really, really close to where I saw Elton John in his farewell tour. So there's a bunch of hotels clustered around there. And those buildings, that architecture with glass, that's everywhere. So tons of the architecture that you see are these glass buildings with the light and water reflecting off of it. So it's like running inside of a jewel. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's like running inside of a jewel. It's the coolest thing. Next slide, please. All right, so it starts in Queen Elizabeth Park, and you basically are going to run park and does not do a complete loop. So it is a point to point. You start in Queen Elizabeth Park and you end in Pender Street, right in the downtown. So they do close off the streets for part of it, but the parts where it's not closed off, it's because you're going to be running on a trail that does not allow traffic. So until you exit that final trail, which is Stanley Park, and you go on a seawall with the ocean on one side and grass on the other. If you see any buildings that are removed from you, you are in that for a long period of time. Then you exit onto the downtown area, and that's the only area where you are encounter traffic. But if you run it in the required time, so their time limit is a little short for a marathon. I've seen time limits be closer to 8.5 hours as their hard cutoff for the race itself, and then leave it open and you move to the sidewalk. This one has a hard cutoff, meaning if you don't see yourself being able to run it in 6.5 hours, you're going to have to think of that strategy of knowing, and that last piece, you'll not only be on the sidewalk, but you may have very little markings left to get yourself to the end. Fortunately, that little bit is only 3 miles long, so it's not a long distance, and it's very, very doable. I've seen people do this. Okay, the course highlights, again, 70% of the race is by the waterfront. There are 3 parks, and these parks are not tiny parks. Queen Elizabeth is the smallest of the parks. Pacific Spirit is this monster park that you will run around. Stanley Park is a world famous park. It's beautiful. Inside of Stanley Park even is a section that you can go to very close by that has open markets. And so it's a lovely thing to go the day before, the day after the race, to stick around. And then also the course highlight and why people come from all over the world to do this race is Vancouver seawall. It's the world's longest uninterrupted seawall. So I hope I'm causing you to drool a little bit. It's like, oh, I did not know that. Okay, the part you did not want to hear, but you know, I can deal with resistance. I don't know if you can, but I can, is that it is a rolling hills race. Just like New York City Marathon has some rolling hills, some ups and downs, this one definitely does. It has less bridges, but it does have rolling hills and one steep one. So I'll talk about that in a minute. And when I say steep, the majority of people who are not in that elite section in the front will be walking this hill because it really feels like this for a bit. All right, course support, 17 water stations, 16 of them have medical support. I thought that was really impressive. So I look at the course and you see where the little red and white cross shows up, and 16 out of the 17 stations have some kind of medical support. That does not mean that they have full medical, but they have enough that if you run into trouble, you're not going to be stranded out there on your own. All right, next slide, please. All right, there's the course. Look at that. See that green there? Queen Elizabeth is the one that's on the right-hand side where you start. And then you go all the way through that huge park and then end up at that one on the top. That's Stanley Park there on the point. Look at all that right by the water. Thank you for tracing that. Is that not amazing? And then those last 3 miles is what you do in the city. So talk about like a world-class setup here where it's absolutely beautiful. And you're like, I'm on a road marathon. This is gorgeous, right? Okay. Next slide. So I'll just give you the quick rundown and then we can go back in the Q&A if you want to ask more detailed questions. I even pulled up a PDF from somebody else's rundown who did a better job than I did when I ran it to sort of block out exactly mile by mile where the best parts, the yummy parts are, and then the not so yummy parts are. And so I sort of broke down his breakdown into a way that's easy to remember. The miles 4 through 7 are the sorry, not sorry section. It's like, this is rolling hills, sorry, not sorry. Vancouver Marathon owns its identity as a rolling hills thing, and it's just gonna like throw that at you and go deal with it. All right, then there's the big hill. I think that happens somewhere around mile 11. And it is totally okay to walk because most people will be walking that. It's over 800 feet of elevation in a steep hill. Then there's Burrard Bridge. And it's nothing that a New York City marathon runner doesn't already know. So if you've done that race, this is not new to you. It occurs late in the race. And that's the pissy part about it. It's after mile 20, I believe. So fatigue is a factor. And it's the reason why it hangs out in people's minds of like, that was hard. But when you look back at it, it's like, well, that wasn't much elevation. It's just because you're darn poopy tired. All right. And then the seawall, you're like, oh, you know, wonderful. That should be Stanley. I'm sorry for the error there. I will fix that later. The seawall is this beautiful waterfront seawall that you run along. And one of my fond memories is running through there. By that time, I had lost my little gel flask, so I had nothing to eat. So I was running on fumes. And because I was just realizing that I had become celiac, I couldn't take anything off of the race tables. Along the way, sort of removed from the seawall, were a couple of restaurants, and there were some people cheering along the way and saying, hey, would you like a beer? And I swear I could have ran over there and just like said very sweetly, can I strangle you, please? Because I was so just fried by that point. But what really helped me is the beauty of the area. I'm like, this is what I trained for. And it really helped me to sort of, if there is a good part about dissociating, the dissociation was being lost in nature. Just gorgeous. And then the last push is those 3 miles. It is a tiny incline uphill push to the finish, just like New York City Marathon has a little bit of incline and your legs are just like, I'm not having it. But then you know, oh, the finish line is coming up. This is a 5K. I know how to do this. And you can push to the finish. So that's sort of my good parts version of what the course is like. Next slide, please. Oh, hi. So everybody always asks me this question. I'm going to deal with your resistances. Like I said, I don't have a problem with resistance. Well, so why not just go run a flat marathon? And I'm like, yeah, you could do that. If you want to go get a PR because you are interested in trying to get into Chicago, or you're trying to get into Boston, or you're trying to get in New York City Marathon, absolutely. Go run a flat or slightly downhill race and pick up your PR. This, they say it on the website, is typically not the race that people pick to get a PR. So then why do people keep go back and do it over and over again? And I keep running into that to say, once you've answered the question about why maybe you don't need to run flat, like that's not your goal, then why run this marathon? And it comes down to all marathons, rolling hills versus downhill versus flat. Rolling hills for me versus a downhill is that you use all the muscles and all the speeds. And because of that, you come out the other end not very worse for wear. Because if you've trained, you've lifted, in your off-season time, you've strengthened those muscles, and then you start doing your build for marathon training, you're using all the muscles. So none of them feel bad, whether you're going uphill, whether you're going downhill, whether you're going flat, you use them all. So this is a great course for that. And some people are going to use this race as part of their training cycle. They use one race that prepares them for the next. So I used this particular race to help me get on towards my my first half Ironman, which was actually a trail run at the end. That's Victoria 70.3. And that's also rolling hills. So, the idea is that you actually train beyond what you actually need for a half Ironman or an Ironman in the build up to there. So this was like the perfect thing to sort of drop that in and go, holy moly, and then find that the 70.3 was much easier. So you can use this as a way to prepare for another race. And then the other thing I was thinking about is that talk about racecations being a thing. I saw entire groups from other countries run this race together as a clump. And many of them, as I asked them, like, where are you from? Why are you running this race? They'd say, oh, this is going to be race number 4 of 8 that I'm doing. From here, I'm going to another country. The entire group was following each other on a schedule to race a marathon every 2 weeks. It was crazy. And I thought, oh, well, that's fun because they were doing the walk-run method that Jeff Galloway is so famous for, and that Hillary can tell you everything you want to know about Jeff Galloway's method of helping people get to race anything they want at whatever speed they need to do. So people will travel from all over and they do this walk-run method, sometimes more than 2 marathons a month. And because the BMO Vancouver is an international city with both a European and an Asian appeal, they have a huge Asian population there. People from all over the world find that they can find what they want to eat and they find what they want to do. And they do the marathon kind of as an incidental to their trip. It's like, oh, there's a marathon in there somewhere. From Vancouver, you can fly to places like Haida Gwaii, which is, it used to be called Queen Charlotte Islands. It's up in the north. And they recently, the Canadian government gave back the island's name to the original tribe that's there. It's one of the few places in Canada that has done that as part of the reparations for so much damage of colonization in the area. The government almost wiped their people out. And now Haida Gwaii is building back their tribe. They have maybe 8 elders who still speak the language, and they're trying to preserve it. It's a beautiful, very rustic, natural place to go and visit if you're interested in that. The other thing you could do is from Vancouver, rent a car and drive from Vancouver to Whistler and on to Calgary. We call it the Canadian Rockies to do that, adventure trip. And you could take an entire week and break that down or longer to see these beautiful places that have lots of places to walk. So you, in your recovery off the marathon, can see just pristine land. So if you like that kind of stuff, you like hiking, you like getting in the mountains, great thing to think about the racecation thing. And not running flat, because you'll need that to do some of the hikes. Okay, next slide. All right. Here's a picture from when I ran that race. That year, it Dumpty dumped, just vomited rain from the skies in the beginning of the race. And so I thought, I am not going to make this. I am, like, at that time, I was 214 pounds and nothing. And so I grabbed a clear garbage bag, punched some holes through it, and I wore that bag for probably the first 10 miles until the rain let up enough that I could take that off without shivering. So it was warm enough in temperature, air temperature, to wear shorts. And with climate change, we've been noticing it is slightly getting warmer and warmer each year. So even if it rains, we're noticing that it's getting warmer. And one of the discussions that's been going on is that most people, when they hit this time of year to run a race like this, a road marathon in May up north, they're coming from areas that are even colder. So they're not acclimated to even the slightest temperature change. So I think it was last year, this Vancouver Marathon had a degree air temperature of 65, and people complained that that was too warm. So compare that to New York City this year, that was 75 was the air temperature, but with the radiant heat off the buildings, it was 80. I was being cooked from the inside out. Now you can imagine if you went from 30-degree temperatures and training outside or treadmilling and then going to this race at 65, you will still find that too humid for your comfort. And so it's interesting that many people actually like the temperature to be just hovering around 50 degrees. They find that that's perfect. And that's exactly what the temperature was the year that I ran. It just rained a lot. So having some kind of rain mitigation strategy going in is helpful, and you'll never know what you get until like 3 days before the race. So compare that to some other Canadian races that I've done where the marathon was tucked inside of an Ironman. I did Ironman Mont Tremblant. That day stormed so badly with snow, hail, rain, and wind that I and others got hypothermia. Not good. It was 80 degrees the day before. It was 40 something degrees the day that I raced and warmed up to about 50, but the wind chill factor took it so low that 30% of the field dropped that day. Not fun. The marathon itself was, frankly, ugly. It's on an old railroad bed, but it connects really well to the race, and that's why that race is there. Now they've improved the trail greatly. They've removed all of the traffic, so now you have a dedicated trail that's only for runners or cyclists. And then on the day of the marathon, but the Ironman, they make certain that bicyclists are not on that trail. So they did improve it. But I found it to run the marathon mostly in the dark. So it was just about sunset was starting, because I'm that slow. That's my pace. And I finished in the dark, that I didn't get to see much of the beauty of that area. Contrast that with Whistler, Canada. The marathon attached to Ironman Canada, when it was in Whistler, is actually a very beautiful trail that runs through forested area. The only complaint that people had about it were twofold. One, it's twice around, so it's not a point to point, or one large loop. And also that there were bears. So if the bears come, bears take precedence. You have to stop for the bears, because if you don't, they might chase you. So there were actually course monitors. Yeah. Yeah, no bears, not like in the bears. The other complaint is the year that I did it, which was in 2018, they also had a problem with the tadpoles. So there were little baby frogs from one of the ponds that had proliferated so much that there were baby frogs all over one part of the trail. So they had to reroute it around this other area, which is why we ended up running into the bears. So VMO, Vancouver Marathon, has no bears. It has no tadpoles. You won't run out of cups. That's New York City Marathon. You won't run out of cups. You won't run into banana peels on the ground. Canadians, I don't know what it is. They're so sweet. They're so nice. They're just like, oh, sorry. They will take their banana peels and throw it in the garbages provided. They are very, very conscientious lot to not throwing things everywhere. And they have, of course, people just like at New York City, desperately trying to keep the garbage very, very contained. But I found this was one of the cleanest road marathons I have ever been into for its size. Last year was about, I think, over 22,000 runners total. And the marathon was closer to up to about, the year I did it, maybe 7,000 or 8,000 runners tops. So it has grown for sure, but they have also stepped up and grown their volunteer support, making it, again, still one of the cleanest races ever. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's a sample again of those really beautiful glass buildings that are everywhere where you see the reflection of other buildings, and it's really like running inside of a jewel. I love that part. It's just right when you're so tired, you don't want to be looking at anything ugly. There's not a lot of like just hard concrete buildings. There's things with glass, there's things with green on it. And it totally helps focus and sort of calm the mind to say, this too shall end. All right, next slide. I think we might be at the end. Okay. I'd love to open it up to any questions or comments about what you have seen and heard, including your stories of like what you're looking for in marathons for yourself.
How far is the start from the finish? And is there like a hotel where you could walk to both?
Great question. So the start is, as you can see, if you want to go back to that course picture, if you could, Hillary. And it's all the way back.
Oh,
Yeah, just flip back through.
let's see if I could.
Yeah, there you go. So if you can put your little pointer on the start.
Okay.
And then now put your little pointer on the finish. There is no way you're going to walk to that. That distance there has so many streets and things that the way they ask you to do it is that your finish line things will be waiting for you in a bag that you can design yourself as you go through the finish line, and you pick up some warm clothes or whatever you need, and you have your loved ones or your way back, which I suggest not being transportation such as a car or a taxi, that instead you think about ahead of time, taking public transportation and going to another spot, and then from there getting back to your hotel. So most people don't think about trying to stay near the finish line. There's not a lot of good hotels there. They're trying to stay somewhere where they would like to be, that they find interesting, and then find a way that morning to make certain that they get there, usually using public transportation. So there's a Sky train there. I wouldn't suggest taking the buses, but on the website, they have a bunch of information on what you would want to take, so that you actually choose your hotel based on the amenities that you want to be closest to versus the start or finish. I know that sounds odd, but because both of the start and finish aren't really particularly near anything you might want to be near. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Just a quick follow-up. How far is the hockey arena from the marathon course?
How far is the
Hockey arena.
The hockey arena from the marathon course. Oh, that's a good question. I don't have an answer for you.
Oh, okay.
I would have to
Google it.
look that one up. It is on the, let's see. Is the hockey arena right? Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
Where the
Not
Vancouver,
close.
and,
Yeah,
no,
it's not close. No, it's not
No.
convenient. You can't walk it, is what I'm saying. But what you
No.
could do again is, in looking at the lay of land, you'll have to go to the expo, which is not at the start nor the finish. It's not close either. So you have a couple of different places you need to go to. But the expo area traditionally is right near a waterfront area that has a bunch of cool things and vendors and restaurants and shops. So some people see it as like an entire fun thing to do, to hang out there at the expo right by the water, go get their stuff, do something in town, and then head back to their hotel and rest. Not really set up for a lot of social. So if you're coming with a group, you'll want to stay in your own hotel together so you can socialize together. It's unlike New York City, where I felt like in going to the general area where the finish line is, you would run into tons and tons of runners just milling around because their hotel is in that walkable area from Central Park. This isn't really the way people typically structure their time in there. And I don't know if that's a Canadian thing or it's just the way the city is laid out. I didn't even try to book my hotel close to one or the other, but rather to say, where do I want to be? And then now work it backwards. How do I get to each of those places in time? The bridge, the Burrard Bridge, is a huge cable span bridge. And because it's part of the course that you'll go on, it's also the main way people get to and from the area. So you have to work through using the website tools that they give you on making certain that your pathway to getting to the start doesn't have to cross that bridge. And maybe that's the only main factor that drives people to stay a little closer to the start than they actually do to the finish, and work the finish part as a separate piece of the puzzle. How am I going to get back to my hotel? My recommendation is don't be in a hurry. Don't be in a hurry. Any other questions? Does it sound intimidating? Does it sound inspiring?
It sounds amazing. It sounds amazing. It sounds like we should all do this next year.
I'm at the point where, even though I'm not personally seeking another road marathon this coming year, if any of you said, I am seriously thinking about doing it, I would rethink that and say, I can meet you out there. I could do it. It's just so much fun as a marathon that I would totally consider doing it. But because I've got bucket list items, it's not my highest priority to return yet and repeat something I've done before. But I would be willing to do it if somebody said, I want to, and I'd like to run this with you.
Now, have you done Big Sur?
I have not.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to ask you, if you compare the two, which one would be?
Big Sur will have
bucket list.
Right. So Big Sur will have those big waves that come in and you hit and you hear the roar of the ocean. You don't hear the roar of the sound from BMO. You'll hear the lapping, the gentle lapping of water against the seawall. But because it's a protected bay, you will never see a rogue wave come in there and go smash up against that seawall. Doesn't happen.
Steve.
Yes.
Hi, question. What can you say about the wind factor, such as it is?
It's a
'Cause, that's
yeah.
a non-starter for me. I'm not a wind
Yeah.
person.
It is a protected bay.
Okay.
So even though you look at that and you go, oh, that's by all of that water, I didn't find it windy because it's a protected bay. So if you actually look at the bigger map, so you see Vancouver, and then you see where it is compared to the ocean versus the sound, you'll see that's actually kind of protected there.
Cool, thank you.
Anybody else? It looks awesome. And you did a fantastic job describing it and I think getting us all excited about it. I would consider it for 24, not for 23, because personally, I'm going to Japan in 23 on May, so. that's where
Okay,
I'm
maybe
gonna
I'll
be.
see you there in 24.
But maybe in 24, I would do that. That would be a lot of fun. I think, getting a group together would be awesome. And it just sounds like an amazing, I've been to Vancouver. Vancouver is one of the most gorgeous cities. I've always said one day if I retire, I would retire to Vancouver because I love it so much. Let me ask you something. Do you know if it's still ski season? I think it might be in Whistler at that
Yes, ski
point.
season won't end until
Right.
probably June. And with climate change, that could be less or that could be more. But I do remember my friend who lives near Whistler still skiing in July. And that was last year. So the mountain might be closed in terms of all the things that help transport people to the top, like even later in July. But because she lives there, she'd just take her skis on her back and with her daughter and go hike a section,
love
and
it.
then they would snowboard and ski down together.
That's
So
awesome.
even when it's closed, people do that all the time. One other thing that I forgot to mention is that May 7th and May 30th are close enough in time that if you are, you have a month off in your vacation, and guess what? You could do the marathon and then the 70.3 in Victoria, hop on over by a ferry, right? Go over to Victoria and do the 70.3. Again, one of the few half Ironmans that has a trail run as part of its thing. So if you want like sort of a little like go like do this, do more than you need, and then you hit that trail, you just be going, oh wow, this is easy compared to what I just did with the marathon. And again, one of the most beautiful courses I've ever been on for a half Ironman.
Well, thank you so much. This was so informative. I love this and I really appreciate your time in putting this all together. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
And if anybody has any questions, after this, Imei, where can they get you?
The Facebook page that you have set up, we are triathletes. You can put a question there. If you don't want to put it there and you want to reach out to me directly, go to messages on Facebook, if that's one way you want to do that. If you want to email me directly, it's my middle name, imei.hsu@gmail.com.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And thank you all for attending. And I'll be putting this up on the website soon.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.